September 25th, 1944. 21:15 hours. Combat Command. A headquarters, 1 mile east of Arracourt, Lorraine. Colonel Bruce Clarke pressed his radio handset against his ear, listening to the carefully orchestrated chaos erupting across the German signals intelligence network. His operators were broadcasting in the clear, voices deliberately panicked, calling out tank positions, ammunition states, casualty figures, every word a lie, every transmission designed to be intercepted. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Through the rain-streaked window of his command post, Clarke watched American tank engines roar to life, their movement intentionally noisy, tracks clanking loudly enough to carry across the wet autumn fields. To German listening posts 3 miles east, it would sound exactly like what the radio chatter claimed: a desperate American counterattack forming up, tanks massing for a blazing forward assault against German positions. What German intelligence officers couldn't know, was that those tanks were moving backward, away from the front, abandoning their positions in what would become known as the Orson Welles Attack, named after the famous 1938 radio hoax that convinced America it was under alien invasion. Clarke was pulling off the same trick against the 5th Panzer Army, and in the confusion of false information, 43 Panthers and Panzer IVs had already burned across the fields of Lorraine over the past week. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. But this deception, this final act of tactical genius, was merely the culmination of 7 days of revolutionary American warfare that had shattered German doctrine and destroyed 2 entire panzer brigades. The story of how American tankers learned to advertise their positions, to seemingly surrender tactical advantage, only to ambush German armor in precisely coordinated kill zones, represented something the Wehrmacht had never encountered. Not superior tanks, not heavier armor, but a system of warfare so integrated, so lethal in its coordination, that technical superiority became irrelevant. The morning of September 19th had introduced German tankers to a new kind of combat, and by September 25th, as Clarke staged his phantom counterattack, the survivors of the 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades carried a lesson that no amount of propaganda could erase. The Americans had turned warfare itself into a trap. The German offensive into Lorraine had been born from desperation masked as aggression. By mid-September 1944, General George Patton's Third Army had torn through France at a pace that terrified German high command. His 4th Armored Division, spearheaded by Combat Command A under Colonel Clarke, had crossed the Moselle River south of Nancy on September 13th and 14th, establishing a bridgehead that threatened to punch straight through to the German industrial heartland. Hitler's response came with characteristic fury. The newly formed 5th Panzer Army under General Hasso von Manteuffel would crush the American spearhead, recapture the city of Lunéville, and eliminate the 12th Corps bridgehead. For this mission, Germany committed its last operational reserves in the West, the 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, freshly equipped with factory-new Panther tanks, plus elements of the veteran 11th Panzer Division. The 113th Panzer Brigade under Oberst Freiherr von Seckendorf fielded 45 Panther tanks and 45 Panzer IV medium tanks. The 111th Panzer Brigade, commanded by General Major Heinrich Walter Bronsart von Schellendorf, brought similar strength. Combined with the 11th Panzer Division's remaining 40 tanks, German forces assembled 262 armoured fighting vehicles for the counter-offensive. On paper, the mathematics favoured Germany overwhelmingly. The Panther tank mounted the fearsome 75mm KUK-42 gun that could destroy any American tank at 2,000 meters. Its frontal armor, 80mm thick and sloped at 55 degrees for an effective thickness of 140mm, was essentially invulnerable to the Sherman 75mm gun, except at suicidally close range. Against this, Colonel Clarke's Combat Command A fielded the 37th Tank Battalion under Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, elements of the 35th Tank Battalion, the 53rd Armored Infantry Battalion, and Company C of the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, equipped with M18 Hellcats. Total American strength in the Arracourt sector, approximately 140 tanks and tank destroyers. German doctrine, perfected over 5 years of war, emphasized the tank duel, long-range engagements where technical specifications determined victory. At Panzer training schools, crews spent months mastering gunnery at extended ranges, studying ballistic tables, practicing the geometry of the perfect ambush. The Panther represented the ultimate expression of this philosophy, a technical masterpiece designed to dominate any opponent through superior firepower and protection. Unknown to the German commanders assembling their forces east of Arracourt, the Americans had developed a completely different philosophy of armored warfare, one that made individual technical specifications almost irrelevant, and over the next 11 days, they would demonstrate this philosophy with devastating effect. The terrain around Arracourt consisted of gently rolling agricultural land, dotted with small villages and patches of forest. Open fields offered excellent fields of fire but little concealment. Small ridges and shallow valleys provided dead ground for movement. It was tank country, ideal for the kind of long-range gunnery at which the Panther excelled, or so the Germans believed. What they didn't know was that American intelligence had been tracking their every movement for days. Ultra-intercepts from Bletchley Park had revealed the German concentration before the offensive even began. Aerial reconnaissance from observation aircraft had photographed every German assembly area. Local French resistance members had reported tank movements, identified supply dumps, guided American units through back roads and farm tracks. While German reconnaissance remained virtually non-existent due to fuel shortages and the lack of dedicated scouting elements in the hastily formed Panzer brigades, Combat Command A operated with near-perfect battlefield awareness. Colonel Clarke knew where every German tank was located. The Germans advanced blind. September 19th dawned with heavy fog blanketing the Lorraine countryside. Visibility dropped to less than 100 meters in the low-lying areas. The Germans, viewing this as tactical advantage that would protect them from American artillery observation and air attack, launched their assault at 0800 hours. Company-sized elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade advanced toward Arracourt from the east and south, 43 Panthers and Panzer IVs rolling through the morning mist. They penetrated the thin American outpost line quickly, brushing aside scattered resistance. By 0815, German tanks were within 1 mile of Combat Command, a headquarters at Arracourt. Victory seemed imminent. Then the trap closed. The American response demonstrated a level of coordination that German doctrine couldn't comprehend. Within seconds of German tanks being spotted by forward observers, every American unit in the sector knew their exact positions. Radio networks connecting every Sherman tank to higher headquarters enabled instant communication. Artillery forward observers, embedded with tank units, called in immediate fire missions. Before the Panthers could exploit their breakthrough, 12 batteries of American artillery, 144 guns, opened fire simultaneously. The Americans had perfected time-on-target fire missions where shells from multiple batteries, fired at different times from different distances, arrived on target at the same instant. The barrage that fell on the German tanks was unlike anything they had experienced. White phosphorus shells burst among the Panthers, blinding optics with burning smoke. High explosive rounds damaged tracks, destroyed vision blocks, wounded exposed commanders. The fog that was supposed to protect German tanks instead trapped them in a killing zone where they couldn't see their targets, but American artillery could find them through pre-registered coordinates. Through the smoke and fog came the Shermans, not frontally, as German doctrine anticipated. Not in the kind of tank duel where the Panther's superior gun would dominate. The American tanks emerged from 3 directions simultaneously, using terrain features the Germans hadn't properly reconnoitred, dead ground that allowed covered movement to within 500 meters. At these close ranges, where the Sherman's 75mm gun could penetrate the Panther's 40mm side armor, American advantages in crew training and coordination became decisive. The Sherman's hydraulic turret traverse could rotate 360 degrees in 15 seconds. The Panther's manual traverse required 60 seconds, 4 times slower. Captain Richard Lameson's Company C of the 37th Tank Battalion demonstrated the new American doctrine perfectly. When 8 Panthers attempted to withdraw from the ambush near Les Ayes, Lameson took 4 Shermans on a high-speed flanking maneuver, racing 3,000 yards across open ground to reach a commanding ridge west of Bézange-la-Petite. His tanks arrived approximately 3 minutes before the Panthers appeared below. The engagement that followed lasted less than 5 minutes. Lameson's gunners, trained at Fort Knox to load and fire in under 4 seconds, knocked out 4 Panthers before the German crews could respond effectively. When the surviving Panthers turned their turrets toward the American position, Lameson's tanks withdrew over the crest of the ridge, moved south, then reappeared from a new angle and destroyed the remaining 4 Panthers. This wasn't tank combat as the Germans understood it. This was coordinated maneuver warfare, where speed, communication, and tactical flexibility mattered more than armor thickness or gun penetration at extreme range. Near Arracourt, 4 M18 Hellcat tank destroyers, under Lieutenant Edwin Leiper, executed a textbook tank destroyer mission. Concealed, on Hill 246, they allowed a column of Panthers to approach to within 800 meters before opening fire. The Hellcat's 76mm guns, while unable to penetrate Panther frontal armor, devastated the German tank's side armor in rapid succession. Before German crews could traverse their turrets toward the threat, the Hellcats had fired, displaced, and were racing to new positions at 55 miles per hour. The German after-action report noted enemy vehicles exhibiting speeds estimated at 80 kilometers per hour, appearing and vanishing before effective return fire could be delivered. 1 Hellcat destroyed 7 Panthers, another knocked out 5. German tankers had never encountered anything that moved so fast, hit so hard, and disappeared so completely. As morning fog lifted around noon, the full weight of American air superiority manifested. P-47 Thunderbolts from the 19th Tactical Air Command arrived in continuous waves. Integration between ground and air forces was seamless. Forward air controllers riding in Sherman tanks used the same maps and grid references as ground units, vectoring fighter bombers onto targets within minutes of request. Army observation pilot Major Charles Bazooka Charlie Carpenter, flying his L-4 Piper Cub, armed with 6 bazookas, engaged German tanks directly. Diving through ground fire, Carpenter fired all his rockets in repeated passes, claiming 2 Panthers destroyed and forcing several others to break formation. The psychological impact exceeded the physical damage. German tankers couldn't concentrate without risking air attack. Movement became dangerous. The constant presence of American aircraft created a sense of being perpetually watched and targeted. By nightfall, September 19th, the 113th Panzer Brigade withdrew to Moncourt, having suffered catastrophic losses. 43 tanks destroyed, mostly factory new Panthers. Approximately 200 in infantry casualties. American losses: 3 M18 tank destroyers and 5 M4 Sherman tanks knocked out. 6 soldiers killed, 13 wounded. The kill ratio exceeded 8-1. But more significant than the numbers was the psychological impact. German tank crews had discovered that technical superiority meant nothing when the enemy refused to fight according to German rules. September 20th brought continued German attacks, now led by the 111th Panzer Brigade that had arrived too late to participate in the previous day's disaster. Oberst von Seckendorf of the 113th had been killed. His replacement faced the same tactical problem: how to engage an enemy who wouldn't stand still, who coordinated artillery and air power with ground maneuver, who turned every German advance into an ambush. The Germans tried different tactics. They advanced under cover of fog. They attempted to concentrate forces for breakthrough attacks. They sought to use superior range to engage American tanks from distance. Nothing worked. American artillery bracketed every German concentration. fighter bombers destroyed vehicles caught in open ground. When Panthers tried to engage at long range, Shermans used smoke rounds to blind them, then maneuvered for flank shots. On September 22nd, German attacks reached their crescendo. General Major Bronsart von Schellendorf, commanding the 111th Panzer Brigade, personally led an assault to recapture the town of WWII. The attack began in pre-dawn darkness with approximately 30 Panthers and supporting infantry. The American response demonstrated their systematic superiority. Within minutes of contact, the entire 4th Armored Division knew German positions. Artillery fire missions were called. Air support was requested and confirmed. Infantry and tanks coordinated their defense. When Panthers approached WWII, they found American tanks positioned in hull-down defensive positions, with pre-planned artillery concentrations covering every approach. The engagement at WWII became a masterclass in combined arms defense. American tanks held the center, firing from concealed positions. Tank destroyers engaged from the flanks. Artillery separated German infantry from their tank support. As morning fog lifted, P-47 Thunderbolts added their firepower to the maelstrom. General Major von Schellendorf was killed in the fighting, his command Panther destroyed by artillery fire. His death immediately paralyzed the 111th Panzer Brigade. Subordinate commanders, trained to follow orders rather than exercise initiative, didn't know how to respond. The loss of both brigade commanders within 4 days devastated German command and control. By contrast, American doctrine emphasized command flexibility. When commanders fell, subordinates immediately assumed control. Captain James Leach, commanding Company B of the 37th Tank Battalion, demonstrated, and this when his radio was knocked out by a near miss. His platoon leaders continued executing the plan independently. Leach's company destroyed 17 German tanks while losing only 1 Sherman, a feat that earned him the Distinguished Service Cross. The pattern repeated across the Arracourt sector. German attacks, launched with determination and courage, were systematically destroyed by American coordination of tanks, artillery, infantry, and air power. The technical specifications that German doctrine valued so highly, armor thickness, gun penetration, maximum range, became irrelevant when American forces refused to engage on German terms. Captain William Dwight's Sherman platoon demonstrated American tactical advantages during an engagement near Les Ayes. According to official after-action reports preserved in military archives, Dwight's gunner, Sergeant Donald Decker, destroyed 4 Panthers in rapid succession at ranges under 800 meters. Decker's account provided crucial, tactical detail. We came around the corner of a small wood, and there were 3 Panthers in the open about 600 yards away. They were traversing toward us, but we got the first shots off. I put 3 rounds of armor-piercing into the first one's side before he could get his gun around. The second one I hit in the rear as he tried to back up. The third managed to fire once, but missed high before we knocked him out. This engagement highlighted the American advantage in rapid fire. While German crews followed elaborate firing procedures, commander identifies target, provides range estimation, gunner adjusts sights, loader selects appropriate ammunition. American crews operated on instinct developed through thousands of practice rounds at Fort Knox. They sacrificed long-range accuracy for close-range speed. And at Arracourt's typical engagement ranges of 500 to 800 meters, speed mattered more than precision. The German supply situation began catastrophic and deteriorated rapidly. Panthers consumed fuel at 2.5 gallons per mile cross-country, meaning a full 200-gallon tank provided only 80 miles of range. With supply lines under constant air attack and fuel production crippled by strategic bombing, German tanks often sat immobile, waiting for fuel that never arrived. Ammunition posed another crisis. German Panthers, primarily supplied with armor-piercing rounds optimized for long-range tank killing, couldn't effectively engage infantry or soft targets. When ammunition ran low, German crews had no ability to resupply under combat conditions. American logistics, by contrast, maintained consistent fuel and ammunition deliveries through the famous Red Ball Express convoy system and efficient supply networks. By September 24th, the immediate German threat had been contained. Combat Command A reported destroying 86 German tanks with another 114 damaged or broken down. Of the 262 tanks and assault guns the 5th Panzer Army committed to the offensive, only 62 remained operational. The 113th Panzer Brigade had ceased to exist as an effective fighting unit. The 111th Panzer Brigade was similarly devastated, but General Patton faced his own crisis. On September 22nd, 3rd Army Headquarters informed him that fuel supplies were being drastically restricted. Priority had shifted to Field Marshal Montgomery's 21st Army Group in preparation for Operation Market Garden. Patton's advance would halt. The 4th Armoured Division would transition to defensive operations. For Colonel Clarke, this created a tactical problem. His Combat Command A held an extended salient deep in German-held territory. The position was vulnerable to continued German attacks. German forces, despite their losses, still outnumbered American tanks in the immediate area. And intelligence reports indicated another major attack was forming. Clarke needed to withdraw to more defensible positions. But any withdrawal risked exposing his forces to German counterattack during movement. German intelligence was undoubtedly monitoring American radio traffic, watching for signs of weakness. A conventional withdrawal could trigger a German assault that would catch American forces in vulnerable transit. The solution came from an unlikely source of inspiration. Clarke had heard of Orson Welles' famous 1938 radio broadcast of War of the Worlds, where realistic news bulletins about a Martian invasion had caused panic across America, despite being pure fiction. If radio could convince millions of Americans that aliens were attacking, couldn't it convince German intelligence officers that Americans were doing the opposite of what they were actually doing? On the evening of September 25th, Clarke assembled his staff and outlined the plan. Combat Command A would stage a fake battle over the radio. Operators would broadcast in the clear, using simple codes that German signals intelligence could easily break. They would describe a massive American counterattack forming up, tanks massing for an assault, artillery preparing fire missions. The transmissions would be deliberately panicked, suggesting American forces were responding to a German breakthrough. To reinforce the deception, American tank engines would roar loudly. Crews would rev engines, clank tracks, create maximum noise. From German listening posts, it would sound exactly like what the radio traffic claimed. American armor concentrating for a major attack. But instead of attacking forward, American tanks would be withdrawing backward. The 10th Armored Infantry Battalion would pull back to supporting positions on a new, tighter perimeter. The 37th Tank Battalion would then withdraw to the rear, its movement masked by the sounds of other vehicles and the confusion of false radio traffic. The operation began at 2100 hours. American radio operators went to work, their voices urgent, coordinates flowing. Baker 6, this is Alpha 3. We have heavy enemy contact at Grid 5, 93427. Requesting immediate tank support. Alpha 3, Baker 6, Roger. Moving 2 platoons to your position, estimate 10 minutes. None of it was real. Baker 6 wasn't moving anywhere except backward. The grid coordinates pointed to empty fields. But German intelligence officers, listening intently to American communications, heard exactly what they expected. An American force in crisis, scrambling to respond to German pressure. Tank engines roared across the American positions. Crews revved motors unnecessarily, creating a cacophony of mechanical noise. Tracks clanked as vehicles moved, but they moved west, away from the front, not east toward German lines. In the darkness and confusion, German observers couldn't distinguish the direction of movement, only its intensity. The deception worked perfectly. German forces, hearing reports of an imminent American attack, braced for defensive combat. Their own counterattack plans were shelved. Resources were reallocated to defensive positions. While Germans prepared to receive an assault, American forces quietly withdrew to stronger positions. By dawn September 26th, Combat Command A occupied a condensed perimeter around Arracourt, one that could be defended with fewer forces. The Germans, discovering the American attack had never materialized, found themselves facing entrenched positions rather than the vulnerable targets they had anticipated. Clarke's Orson Welles Attack had bought crucial time and preserved American combat power. But the deception was merely the final act in a larger revolution in American tactical doctrine. The real story of Arracourt wasn't about fake radio broadcasts or technical trickery. It was about how American forces had learned to advertise their positions, to seemingly surrender tactical advantage, knowing that superior coordination would turn apparent weakness into overwhelming strength. Throughout the battle, American tankers had done something that violated traditional military wisdom. They revealed their positions early. They fired smoke rounds that announced their presence. They made noise deliberately. They called in artillery that marked their locations with shell bursts. Every action that should have made them vulnerable instead became part of an integrated system that destroyed German forces. The key was coordination. When an American tank revealed its position, it wasn't acting alone. Artillery fire was already being called. Air support was being vectored onto target. Other tanks were maneuvering into flanking positions. Infantry was providing security. The individual tank's vulnerability was covered by the combined strength of the entire team. German doctrine, by contrast, emphasized individual tank superiority. The Panther was designed to win tank duels through technical excellence. German crews trained to fight independently, relying on their vehicle's superior specifications. This philosophy made sense when facing opponents who fought the same way. But against American combined arms coordination, it became suicidal. The lessons of Arracourt influenced American armored doctrine for decades. The battle demonstrated that mechanical reliability mattered more than maximum performance. A Sherman that could fight every day was worth more than a Panther that spent half its time in maintenance. The ability to sustain operations, to keep tanks running and fighting continuously, multiplied combat power in ways that armor thickness couldn't match. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Crew training and tactical flexibility proved more important than individual heroics. American tank crews, products of standardized training at Fort Knox and Camp Hood, operated with consistent competence. They could perform any role in the tank, coordinate with other arms instinctively, adapt to changing situations without detailed orders. German crews, increasingly inexperienced due to losses and hasty training, couldn't match this institutional excellence. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Logistics determined strategic possibilities. The American ability to supply fuel, ammunition, and spare parts, even at the end of a 400-mile supply line, enabled continuous operations. German forces, unable to maintain adequate supply, saw their tactical options progressively constrained until immobility meant inevitable defeat. The aftermath of Arracourt sent shockwaves through German military leadership. For the first time in the West, German armor had been decisively defeated in conditions that should have favored them. Superior tanks, local numerical superiority, defending familiar terrain. All the advantages that German doctrine claimed would guarantee victory had proven insufficient against American systematic warfare. General Hasso von Manteuffel, one of Germany's most capable panzer commanders, arrived on September 27th to personally assess the disaster. His final attack on September 29th, leading approximately 30 remaining Panthers in conjunction with infantry from the 11th Panzer Division, demonstrated professional competence despite material disadvantages. But American responses were overwhelming. Artillery separated German infantry from tank support. Tank destroyers engaged from flanks while Shermans held the center. As fog lifted, P-47 Thunderbolts arrived in strength. By noon, Manteuffel's attack had failed completely. 22 German tanks lay destroyed or abandoned. The remaining forces withdrew toward German borders. When the battle ended on September 29, 1944, German losses were catastrophic. From an initial strength of 262 tanks and assault guns, German forces retained only 62 operational vehicles, a loss rate of 76%. The 113th Panzer Brigade had ceased to exist as an effective unit. The 111th Panzer Brigade was similarly devastated. The 11th Panzer Division was reduced to regimental strength. American losses, while not insignificant, were far lighter. Combat Command A lost 25 tanks and 7 tank destroyers during the 11 days of fighting. Most damaged American tanks were quickly repaired and returned to service. Crew casualties remained relatively low due to the Sherman's better escape hatches and internal layout that facilitated quick evacuation. The kill ratio, approximately 3.6 to 1 in favor of American forces, contradicted everything German doctrine predicted. The Panther, superior in armor and firepower, had been decisively defeated by the supposedly inferior Sherman. But victory hadn't come through tank versus tank combat. It came through superior integration of combined arms, better tactical flexibility, overwhelming artillery and air support, and most critically, the systematic coordination that turned American positions from vulnerabilities into traps. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, whose tactical leadership proved decisive throughout the battle, provided comprehensive assessment in his after-action report. Abrams emphasized that victory came not from any single factor, but from systematic application of combined arms doctrine. His 37th Tank Battalion had demonstrated that aggressive action, supported by artillery and air power, could defeat technically superior opponents. Abrams would later become Chief of Staff of the United States Army. His experiences at Arracourt influenced American armored doctrine through the Cold War. The M1, Abrams tank, named in his honor, embodied lessons learned at Arracourt, emphasizing reliability, crew survivability, and systems integration over pure technical specifications. On the German side, General von Manteuffel provided perhaps the most telling assessment. In post-war interrogations, he stated that Arracourt demonstrated the bankruptcy of German tactical doctrine. The Wehrmacht's emphasis on technical superiority and individual warrior prowess had proven inadequate against American systematic warfare. The Americans had industrialized combat, turning war into a production process where superior organization and logistics guaranteed victory. The battle's influence extended far beyond immediate tactical results. American intelligence superiority, demonstrated so decisively at Arracourt, became a model for future operations. Ultra-intercepts had provided strategic warning. Tactical reconnaissance from armored cavalry and light aircraft had provided continuous updates. Local resistance networks had supplied crucial information. The integration of intelligence from multiple sources created unprecedented battlefield awareness. Colonel Oskar Koch, intelligence officer of Third Army, had developed innovative techniques for intelligence fusion. His staff correlated ultra-intercepts with aerial reconnaissance, prisoner interrogations, and captured documents to create comprehensive enemy assessments. At Arracourt, American commanders often knew German intentions before German subordinate units received their orders. This intelligence advantage multiplied American combat power immeasurably. The unglamorous role of maintenance units deserves special recognition. The 126th Ordnance Maintenance Battalion supporting the 4th Armored Division performed mechanical miracles throughout the battle. Operating from forward positions under occasional artillery fire, maintenance teams kept American armor running at unprecedented operational rates. Master Sergeant John Fulner, a maintenance platoon sergeant, described the system in a 1945 interview. "We had assembly line maintenance down to a science. Track repair, 1 hour. Engine swap, 4 hours. Transmission replacement, 6 hours. We had spare parts stockpiled at company, battalion, and division level. If something broke, we could fix it or replace it within a day." This maintenance capability meant damaged tanks quickly returned to action. A Sherman hit on Monday could be fighting again by Wednesday. German Panthers, requiring specialized tools and scarce spare parts, might remain disabled for weeks if they could be recovered at all under American artillery and air attack. Weather played a crucial but complex role at Arracourt. The morning fog of September 19th through 21st initially seemed to favor German attacks, masking their approach and negating American air superiority. But fog also eliminated the Panthers' long-range advantage, forcing combat at ranges where Shermans could effectively engage. When weather cleared September 21st through 23rd, American advantages multiplied. Clear skies brought overwhelming air support. Good visibility enabled artillery observers to engage distant targets. Rain returned September 24th through 26th, creating mud that particularly affected German operations. The Panthers' interleaved road wheels, designed to distribute weight, became clogged with mud that froze overnight. Several Panthers were immobilized not by combat damage, but by frozen mud locking their running gear. Shermans, with simpler track systems and lighter weight, could break free with their own power or quick maintenance. The Battle of Arracourt validated massive American investment in training infrastructure. Fort Knox, the Armored Force School, had developed the world's most comprehensive tank crew training program. Every American tanker at Arracourt had completed 17 weeks of basic and advanced individual training, 13 weeks of crew collective training, 8 weeks of unit combined arms training, extensive live fire exercises with full ammunition allocations, and comprehensive maintenance training on every tank component. This training created standardized excellence. Any American tank crew could operate effectively with any other, knowing procedures and tactics were consistent. The loss of individual crew members, while tragic, didn't eliminate effectiveness because every member could perform multiple roles. German training had collapsed by 1944. Fuel shortages meant minimal driving practice. Ammunition shortages limited gunnery training. Many German tankers at Arracourt had less than 100 hours of actual tank experience compared to American crews with over 1,000 hours. The strategic context of September 1944 made Arracourt's impact even more significant. The Wehrmacht was collapsing on all fronts. Soviet forces had destroyed Army Group Center and were approaching German borders. Allied forces had liberated France and Belgium. Strategic bombing had devastated German industry. The counteroffensive at Arracourt represented one of Germany's last attempts to regain initiative in the West. Its failure meant Germany could no longer mount significant offensive operations. For Americans, Arracourt validated their entire approach to warfare. The combination of industrial production, systematic training, technological integration, and tactical flexibility had proven superior to German quality and doctrine. The battle demonstrated that American methods could defeat any enemy anywhere, a lesson that influenced United States military doctrine through the rest of the 20th century and beyond. The human reality of armored combat at Arracourt was terrifying for both sides. Tank warfare wasn't clean mechanical duels, but a nightmare of fire, explosion, and death. Sherman crews faced constant danger of catastrophic destruction. A Panther shell penetrating a Sherman could ignite ammunition, creating an inferno that gave crews seconds to escape. German tankers faced equal horrors. Panthers hit by white phosphorus shells filled with toxic smoke. Crews had to choose between staying inside and suffocating or evacuating under machine gun fire. Tank commanders, who often fought with open hatches for better visibility, were particularly vulnerable to artillery airbursts that sprayed shrapnel into turrets. Yet amid horror, moments of humanity emerged. American medics treated German wounded alongside their own. Tank crews risked their lives to extract enemies from burning vehicles. Local French civilians, despite suffering under German occupation, provided aid to wounded of both sides. The Battle of Arracourt generated numerous German prisoners, who provided valuable intelligence. Interrogations conducted according to Geneva Convention, protocols revealed the depth of German supply and morale problems. Captured tank crews described fuel shortages that limited tactical options. They reported receiving only basic training due to fuel conservation. They complained about mechanical problems that left half their tanks non-operational before combat. Most significantly, they expressed shock at American material superiority, the volume of artillery, constant air attacks, seemingly unlimited ammunition. American treatment of prisoners followed strict protocols that often surprised Germans accustomed to Eastern Front brutalities. Prisoners received medical treatment, adequate food, protection from harm. This humane treatment, contrasting with Nazi propaganda about American barbarism, often loosened tongues during interrogation. Intelligence gained from prisoner interrogations provided tactical advantages. Knowing German fuel status allowed timing attacks when tanks couldn't maneuver. Understanding mechanical problems suggested aggressive pursuit that prevented maintenance. Awareness, the command casualties enabled exploitation of leadership voids. For the French civilian population around Arracourt, the battle brought both liberation and devastation. Villages were destroyed. Fields were scarred by tank tracks and shell craters. Civilians were displaced from their homes. Yet most, when interviewed post-war, expressed gratitude for liberation despite the cost. The mayor of Arracourt, speaking to American reporters after the battle, said, "The noise was incredible, shells exploding constantly, tanks firing, aircraft overhead. Many houses were destroyed, but we knew this meant liberation was coming. When we saw the burnt German tanks, we knew the Americans had won." French resistance members had provided crucial intelligence to American forces throughout the battle. They reported German movements, identified supply dumps, guided American units through local terrain. This civilian intelligence network, built over years of occupation, gave Americans advantages that reconnaissance couldn't provide. The battle's lessons resonated through military academies for decades. At the United States Army Command and General Staff College, Arracourt became required study. Future officers analyzed how combined arms integration, superior logistics, and tactical flexibility defeated technical superiority. NATO doctrine during the Cold War explicitly drew on Arracourt lessons for defending against Soviet armored superiority. Modern military historians consider Arracourt a watershed moment in armored warfare. The point where industrial-age mass-production warfare evolved toward information-age integrated warfare. The American ability to coordinate multiple weapon systems in real time presaged modern network-centric warfare, where information superiority multiplies combat power. The supreme irony of Arracourt is that German doctrine created conditions for its own defeat. By building increasingly heavy tanks, Panthers, Tigers, King Tigers, Germany created slow, road-bound targets perfect for American tactics. Had Germany continued developing lighter, more mobile tanks, the American advantages in speed and maneuver would have been minimized. Every ton added to German tanks made them more vulnerable to forces that fought like cavalry rather than fortresses. The battle demonstrated that victory doesn't require the best equipment. It requires the right equipment properly employed. German crews in their magnificent Panthers and Tigers were defeated by American crews in vehicles that seemed impossibly vulnerable. The Panther weighed 45 tons with 80mm frontal armor. The Sherman weighed 33 tons with just 50mm frontal armor. Yet the Sherman, as part of an integrated combined arms team, proved decisively superior. The fake radio battle, Clarke's Orson Welles Attack on September 25th, represented the culmination of American tactical innovation at Arracourt. By advertising positions that didn't exist, by surrendering information that wasn't real, Clarke manipulated German intelligence into paralysis, while American forces maneuvered to stronger positions. The deception worked because Germans expected Americans to fight conventionally, to protect information, to hide intentions. When Americans did the opposite, German doctrine had no response. This willingness to break conventional military wisdom characterized American operations throughout the battle, revealing positions to call in artillery, making noise to coordinate air support, concentrating forces in ways that traditional doctrine called suicidal. Every action that should have been weakness became strength through superior coordination. 31 Panthers destroyed in coordinated ambushes throughout the battle, dozens more damaged beyond repair. 2 entire Panzer brigades wrecked as combat units. German offensive capability in Lorraine destroyed. All achieved through tactics that violated traditional military wisdom but demonstrated a new form of warfare. For German tank crews who survived Arracourt, the lessons were harsh and irrevocable. They had encountered an enemy who fought differently than anything in their experience. Not stronger tanks, not heavier armor, but a system of warfare that coordinated every element: tanks, artillery, air power, infantry, logistics, intelligence into overwhelming combat power at the point of decision. The shocked German survivors carried back a truth that contradicted 5 years of Wehrmacht doctrine. Technical superiority wasn't enough. Individual tank excellence wasn't enough. Traditional tactical training wasn't enough. Modern warfare required systematic integration that German forces, with their collapsed logistics, degraded communications, inexperienced crews, and fuel-starved tanks, simply couldn't match. Lieutenant Colonel Abrams and his 37th Tank Battalion had demonstrated that victory in modern warfare came not from individual superiority, but from systematic integration. The 5 or 7 or 12 Shermans that seemed like easy prey to German Panthers had behind them the full weight of American combined arms doctrine, a system that would grind Nazi Germany into unconditional surrender within 7 months. At Arracourt, German tankers learned what their leaders refused to accept. American strength lay not in any single weapon or tactic, but in the ability to organize, supply, and coordinate overwhelming force at decisive moments. They had challenged a system they were powerless to defeat. The fields around Arracourt, littered with burned-out Panthers, told the story with stark clarity. Technical superiority had met systematic superiority. The outcome was never in doubt once Americans demonstrated their ability to coordinate combined arms. German doctrine, perfected over 5 years of war, had encountered something it couldn't comprehend, an enemy who won not through better tanks, but through better integration. The American tankers who advertised their positions, who seemed to surrender tactical advantage, who violated every principle German doctrine held sacred, had in fact been executing revolutionary warfare. Their willingness to reveal locations enabled the artillery coordination that destroyed German formations. Their noise and apparent vulnerability masked the systematic integration that made them invincible. Clarke's fake radio broadcast on September 25th was merely the final demonstration of this principle. By advertising an attack that didn't exist, by surrendering information that wasn't real, he manipulated German intelligence into paralysis. The Orson Welles Attack wasn't just clever deception. It was the ultimate expression of American tactical philosophy at Arracourt: use apparent weakness to mask systematic strength. For the German survivors of the 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, for the veterans of the 11th Panzer Division, the lesson was clear and terrible. They had faced not just superior numbers or resources, though Americans had both. They had faced a completely different conception of warfare, one where individual technical specifications became irrelevant, where traditional military wisdom was turned on its head, where advertising your position became the prelude to coordinated destruction of any enemy foolish enough to accept the apparent opportunity. 31 Panthers ambushed and destroyed because American tankers surrendered positions that existed only to draw German armor into killing zones covered by artillery, air power, and flanking tanks. Dozens more Panthers lost to mechanical failure, fuel shortages, and the systematic attrition of fighting an enemy who could replace every loss while German replacements never arrived. The Battle of Arracourt stands as testament to a fundamental truth of modern warfare: systematic superiority defeats technical superiority. Coordination trumps individual excellence. Integration multiplies force beyond what specifications predict. And sometimes, the best tactic is to advertise your position, knowing that what responds will find not vulnerability, but overwhelming coordinated violence from every direction simultaneously. For those German tankers who survived those 11 days in September 1944, the fields of Lorraine became graveyards of doctrine. The burning Panthers weren't just destroyed vehicles. They were monuments to the failure of German military philosophy when confronted with American systematic warfare. And in that process, there was no room for German Panthers, no matter how technically superior they might be on paper. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.